Hey there, everyone. Welcome to the new episode of What I Watched in Cinemas this month, May edition. And I will have you know, this was a really stacked month at the movies for me, primarily because, my summer vacations have begun. Therefore, I have had a lot of time on my hands to catch up to a lot of stuff. So, this is going to be quite a heavy one. I started the month with The Devil Wears Prada 2. This film, not being bad, was not on my 2026 bingo card. From the get go, this sounded like a cash grab sequel, and don't get me wrong, it is. But it's one of the few legacy sequels that actually has something to say about the world we live in today and how that world has changed and affected the characters over the last 20 years. The film isn't afraid to be a tad bit bleak while addressing the rising increase in the digitization of the modern world, people's dependence on technology, magazines and print slowly going extinct. Meanwhile, serious and credible journalism is losing its relevancy. In theory, these are excellent ideas for this sequel to be tackling in this decade. But I'm afraid this film doesn't really commit to really exploring any of these ideas or say anything substantial about them. The premise starts out promising, but fails to take these interesting themes anywhere. Plus, for a film trying to revel in the magic of the old days, it's ironic how this film has a very bland and colorless digital look to it, standing in sheer contrast to its predecessor that actually looked and felt like a real movie, whereas here there seems to be a lifeless visual aesthetic plaguing the entire film, with a low contrast, evenly lit, desaturated look that doesn't capture any of the beauty of the fashion it thrives on. The plot becomes more messy and more convoluted as the minutes pass by, with characters that are introduced with intriguing thematic ideas but ultimately feel useless in the grand scheme of things. And conflicts are resolved very quickly, barely making us feel any stakes. Even the filmmaking is subpar and wildly inconsistent with its tone. Now, there are a few moments here that are beating with heart and sincerity. Watching these iconic characters after 20 years does feel like a journey, and the performers slip back into their roles with effortless ease. But when the film relies on nostalgia to make us feel emotions, it does not even hold a candle to the original. It's not a bad film by any means. I found it decently entertaining, if too flashy. It's a cinematic fluff piece that kept my attention for 2 hours, but I would be lying to you if I said that this is a film that I'm going to remember, because as seductive as it is also highly forgettable. Patriot. Given that this was one of my most anticipated films of this month, I think it's safe to say that I am a little disappointed. But contrary to the reviews and the audience response, I do not think that this is anywhere near as bad as everyone is making it out to be. In fact, I actually think it's quite a good movie that's weighed down by quite a few flaws. I mean, from the trailers, I was promised a gritty, action-filled spy thriller, and that's pretty much what I got. The film does deliver on its expected genre conventions. Its central topic of tackling government surveillance on the common people of India with the help of opportunistic politicians is timely and highly commendable. Plus, it's backed up by some solid filmmaking that gives this film a sense of sleek classiness that you would expect from a spy film. The film looks great as well, shot on real locations with motivated but stylish lighting. The film does feel like an expensive globe-trotting action movie, and the star-studded cast also do well with what they are given. Composer Sushin Shyam's techno-musical score is probably my favorite aspect of the film. It imbues the film with a sense of exciting and rapid pace, while still using many electronic synth beats to stay true to its digital thematic core, which was highly reminiscent of the music of Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. I also respect the film's commitment to not entirely give in to commercial cinema's tropes. Yes, it has moments of fan service where we see titans like Mammootty and Mohanlal share screen space, but it doesn't resort to the expected conventions of mainstream cinema by adding pointless slow motion entries and item songs. It shows admirable restraint. And of course, the film does have its flaws. Though it has a tightly written, plot heavy script, there are times where everything feels convoluted and contrived. The commonly addressed criticism of an emotional disconnect is valid, and with a 3 hour runtime, the film certainly is and feels overly long and self indulgent. It tries to juggle many themes and plot lines, resulting in the film feeling incredibly stuffed. And though the editing is a huge reason as to why the film feels slick and stylish, there are many times where it's just way too quick, due to which emotions are rarely allowed to be registered. I wish there were more scenes where we just lingered with the characters that we should have gotten to know better. But this hurts the film most in its action sequences, which barely register as comprehensible. You can tell that they were really trying to hide the agility or lack thereof of his aged stars under the guise of quick editing, but instead it just read as confusing and irritating to the eye when bombarded with a million cuts every few seconds. So yes, this film is not as great as I had hoped it would be, given that I have liked some of the director's previous works and the actors are some of the finest from their industries. But did I dislike the film as many people do? Surprisingly, no. I acknowledge that it has many flaws that drag it down from being a much better film, but I would be lying to you if I said that despite all that, I did not have a good time because I had a blast with the movies. After that, I rewatched Hoppers. Yeah, I cannot lie when I say that this is an absolute banger. It is honestly one of the best Pixar films that I've seen in the last couple of years. It is obviously well animated, aided by some solid characters, and a genuinely great script that isn't afraid to get bug nuts insane in moments. And though it was my second time seeing this, I found myself laughing a ton because it's got great visual gags that really worked for me. Plus, I can't remember the last time that I was truly moved by a new Pixar film. This one just hit all the right notes for me. I am very, very happy to see this film become a success. And note to Pixar, please do not make a sequel to this, just make more original films of this quality. After which, I watched Project Hail Mary for the third time. At that point of time, I had heard that this film was going to get its digital release very soon, and so I had one final rewatch left in me. So I finally decided to see this masterpiece a third and final time on the big screen. And it's just insane to me that this film released in my country around 2 months ago, and it's still filling cinema halls to this day. I saw this movie on a Monday afternoon showing and 75% of the theater was full. Watching this film get the love and acclaim it deserves just warms my heart. Not only has it garnered great critical reception, but also been a terrific box office success, and that restores some faith in the fact that maybe the movies are alright. Despite my withstanding issues with the film, it never fails to bring a smile on my face. I just felt pure joy watching this movie that's so evidently crafted with so much love and skill. Plus, Daniel Pemberton's breathtaking score is probably my favorite of the year so far. And yeah, this movie definitely remains as one of my favorite and most cherished movie-going experiences of 2026, and I'm very, very glad that audiences around the world share the same sentiment. The Sheep Detectives. As someone who thought that this film was just going to be incredibly mediocre, judging from the trailers, this turned out to be one of the year's few pleasant surprises. Never did I think that a film about anthropomorphic sheep solving a murder mystery would be one of the year's best films. The movie looks great with vibrant colors that tonally gives the vibe of a children's book. The filmmaking is solid, the whodunit aspect of the story is engaging. The CGI sheep are actually incredible. Not only are they voice acted really well, but the film manages to find a perfect balance of them looking realistic while still being able to make them incredibly expressive, unlike certain films. But despite everything, the film still manages to be a poignant exploration of coming to terms with the concept of death, processing grief, and the importance of memory as preservation of those we love. The film has a light-hearted tone that is certainly accessible to kids, but it doesn't talk down to them. Instead, it uses the tonal aesthetic of a children's storybook to smartly talk about dark subject matter. It's not very often that we get to see movies made for kids these days that can also be enjoyed by people of all ages, that actually respects the children's intelligence. I chuckled and laughed a ton during this film, but also found myself surprisingly moved towards the end. Undoubtedly a delightful time at the movies. Ek Din. I can't really say that this is a film that really surprised me in any way because I expected it to be very mediocre, and that's exactly what this film turned out to be. It's certainly a film that means well. There's some amount of heart and sincerity brimming throughout, but ultimately it ends up feeling soulless, no matter how many emotions it tries so hard to evoke. Firstly, the leads barely have any palpable chemistry. Sai Pallavi is easily the best part of this movie. Her presence radiates off the screen. Junaid Khan isn't terrible, but partly unconvincing in his role as the shy and insecure but sweet and caring romantic lead. The filmmaking is serviceable and the lighting is utterly flat and uninteresting. But apart from its multiple flaws, the premise of the film is deeply problematic, and the movie doesn't seem to explore any real consequences for those problems, which is why the film's misplaced ethics is one of my major issues with this movie. And worse, at times, this film reads like an incel fantasy. Still, I honestly can't dislike this film too much. It seems like something that has been made with love, but I can't deny that overall, the film did not work for me. The premise is morally questionable, the characters are incredibly shallow, the craft is average, and the primary love story is barely believable. So, as much as I hate to say it, I will probably forget about this movie in just one day. Dug Dug. I travelled an hour and back in the middle of the night to catch a showing of this movie in its final day of being in theatres. It was playing in just one showtime in just one theatre in my city, and so I did not have much of a choice on when and where I could watch this, but as someone who actively champions independent cinema, I just had to catch it before it left the theatres. So, was it worth it? Definitely. Dug Dug is a poignant and hilarious satire on blind faith, religious dogmatism, and the commodification of religion. It took me some time to get used to the slow pace of the film, but once I did, it surprisingly jolted with relentless energy. Aided by some of the most electric filmmaking that I have seen all year, its use of multiple crash zooms and whip pans reeked of a filmmaker confident in his vision and craft. It felt like he has hinged off of the stylistic signatures of Tarantino and Wes Anderson, but in his own playful way and Indian sensibilities. When one thinks of an indie film, one associates it with a meditative pace, free from the tropes and templates of high-octane commercial cinema. But Dug Dug stands out as a film that does have a restrained sense of momentum, with its lingering shots and long takes that allows us to stay in the scene and analyze the specifics of a frame. But it's also a film that hints at a comical energy that eventually becomes the ultimate visual language for the rest of the film. I have seen many dislike the montage-esque nature of the second half, and while it is a criticism that I get and partly agree with, I felt like it was stretched to just the right amount. It was surprising and oddly refreshing to see a low-budget independent film have such vigor and dynamism in its visual style. The film also feels highly experimental in its form. The lack of a central human protagonist, its lengthy scenes, and its overuse of rapid montages and time lapses borders on the film feeling like an overlong gimmick. For those who did not like the movie, they have repeatedly said that this is a great idea for a short film stretched into feature length. But to me, this film worked, mostly because of these big and bold swings it takes in its narrative and stylistic choices. And what it has to say about faith and how politicians, royalties, and priests are often quick to jump onto the commercialization of people's religious beliefs is poignant and highly relevant. But the way it tackles this through the lens of a comedy makes it an incredibly sharp social satire. The film isn't afraid to be a little abstract with its colorful imagery too, since it often keeps coming back to a man blowing a large pink balloon that never seems to burst. Does the film's ideas and themes stretch too thin at times? Sure. But the film's speedy rhythm kept me watching every moment. This is one of the most fascinating and self-assured directorial debuts that I have seen in quite a while, and not only is it a biting social commentary, it's also one of the most entertaining films to have come out of the indie cinema space. Ritwik Parikh is a filmmaker to look out for. Top Gun. Never did I expect that I would get to experience the original Top Gun in IMAX, but I am not complaining. And upon this rewatch, the film's flaws became more glaringly evident to me. The lack of fleshed out characters, clunky pacing, incoherent plotting, the lack of an actual antagonist, something that Maverick executed perfectly, does bring the film's quality down, despite how memorable and iconic it still is. But Tony Scott shoots this movie like a motherfucker. The genuinely spectacular filmmaking more than makes up for the average storytelling. Yes, the film does feel quite aimless at times, the character beats feel random and repetitive, but Scott's commitment to shooting almost all of the exterior daytime scenes in sunset is honestly commendable. You rarely see modern Hollywood blockbusters make bold stylistic choices like these anymore. Does the fact that the movie plays Danger Zone 3 times during its entire runtime and Take My Breath Away 4 times in just a span of 20 minutes seem like a deeply silly choice? Yeah, but I also respect it. The 80s were wild times, man. But I'm not kidding when I say that this movie looks absolutely gorgeous. Shot on 35mm film with great use of composition, that every frame looks and feels incredibly tangible. The actors are constantly sweating profusely. The use of lighting is very dramatic, and the film sounds incredible even to this day. Plus, I'm surprised as to how they even managed to capture the aerial photography back in the 80s. All this to say, Top Gun is a perfectly good, by-the-books entertainer that is really elevated to cult classic level status primarily due to the masterful filmmaking from the legendary Tony Scott. If I hadn't seen this film in IMAX, I think I would have liked it just a little lesser. Top Gun Maverick. Yeah, this is probably the best movie ever made. I've seen this film many times, but never in IMAX, and man, seeing it in that format makes this just one of my favorite movie-going experiences this year. There is nothing new I can say about this film. It is brilliantly made, it's moving, it's not only got great character writing but also great commentary about aging and taking bold risks amidst the rapidly growing development of technology. Very much a clever allegory for Tom Cruise's career. It harkens back to the sincere old Hollywood blockbusters that we just don't see anymore. It's grand, sweeping, and sentimental in equal measure. It is a privilege that I got to experience this masterpiece in IMAX. Hokum. This is a film I do not have much to say on, which is surprising given that I actually quite like the film. But I have difficulty judging horror films because I personally am really terrified of watching them. But I did have some difficulty sleeping later that night, so I would say that this movie was pretty effective. Star Wars, The Mandalorian, and Grogu. I went into this movie expecting it to be pretty mediocre, but I just did not expect how bad it was going to be. This is just as soulless and creatively bankrupt as I thought it would be. There are very few redeemable qualities about this film. It looks ugly, it's basically got no actual story, no character arcs, no growth, nothing substantial of any kind. It actually barely feels like a movie. Instead, this film feels like an extremely long episode that was stretched to 2 hours. The pacing is extremely clunky, every conflict is resolved almost instantaneously, the filmmaking is stale, the visuals are lifeless, plastered by this grey digital sheen that makes the film look so polished that it feels artificial. Some of the hand-to-hand scenes are pretty impactful, and Ludwig Göransson is working overtime to deliver a score that breathes some life into this empty corporate product. But apart from that, I literally cannot think of a single reason for why this film needed to exist. Why the story needed to be told. It's narratively void. There was not an ounce of passion emanating through this movie. I did not feel a single emotion throughout this 132-minute snore fest, and a lot happens, but pretty much nothing happens during this entire film. It's what I would call a nothing burger. And as a huge fan of this film series, I have to sadly come to terms with the fact that this franchise is long dead. A new Star Wars movie finally comes out after 7 whole years in theaters, and this is what they put out? I honestly don't have much to say on the actual film itself because there is nothing much to say about it in the first place. It's been ages since I last felt that Star Wars feeling. Series wise, it was Andor Season 1, but film wise, it was The Last Jedi. And since then, the franchise has been afraid to take any real risks. It stopped being challenging and innovative. It doesn't capture anyone's imagination anymore. Instead, we get slop like this, made for nobody. Drishyam 3. Considering that this was one of my most anticipated films of the year, it's heartbreaking that this film turned out to be such a disappointment. As someone who's a huge fan of this franchise, I was partly skeptical but mostly hopeful about how the third part in this trilogy would play out. Alas, it's sadly an incredibly messy and mediocre film. I actually found myself liking the first half. Yes, it's slow in its pace and it reestablishes the world and characters with great patience. It's the expected structure of these movies at this point, and I have grown with these characters and have grown to love and care for them as well. And I knew that despite the slow pace, it's all going to pay off at the end. Little did I know that the film would just crash and burn in the second half. The payoffs that do end up happening feel unearned and confusing, and some of the characters and plot points are just never addressed. The film primarily suffers from the problem of having too much plot. There simply is a lot going on with tons of characters. The film itself struggles with balancing all that it's trying to do and ends up crumbling under its own ambition. I could sense that the story was being stretched needlessly. The film's structure began to feel exposed after a point, where it was just one tiny scene after another, where everyone just keeps talking and talking and talking. This film also has a frequent problem that many sequels often tend to do, and that is undoing the arc of a character to justify the events of the new film. This ends up robbing the emotional growth of a character as they completely change because of a few contrived reasons that aren't credible enough for me to truly buy. The pacing problem continued in the second half as I grew less emotionally engaged and more baffled at how the events transpired, and by the end, the film is so concerned with trying to craft a climax twist that it ended up being too convoluted and ridiculously unbelievable for me. Despite its overdramatic tone and style, the film could not convince me to accept its narrative choices. I understand what they were going for, and conceptually it's a fantastic idea to take this story if they really had to make a third part, but none of it is properly executed. Instead, it feels like a film that's very well aware of the expected beats of a Drishyam film, but fails to recreate it effectively. I walked out of that cinema hall heartbroken, and though I was not expecting this film to be a carbon copy of part 1 and 2, I was hoping it would still work as an independent story. Instead, I can't give you a single reason for why this specific story needed to be told. Franchises should know when to end. This one should have ended with part 2. Shape of Momo. This was absolutely incredible, gripping from start to finish. It was a seemingly aimless but actually poignant and beautiful portrait of imperfect yet nuanced women whose lives are almost completely shaped by patriarchy. I was completely hooked as I watched their lives unfold slowly and meticulously. The filmmaking is spectacular. It reeks of sheer confidence in one's craft. Genuinely one of the best feature debuts that I've seen in quite a while. The film shows incredible restraint with its emotions, but that's when the silences are allowed to be truly impactful. Not only does it address how patriarchy is steeped into society, but also tackles class divide through a complex lens. The characters feel like real people full of flaws and insecurities, but there's also a palpable love emanating from them. The film doesn't judge any of its characters too. Instead, it simply shows us who they are while still having empathy for them. Plus, the genuinely fantastic performances also helped me believe in their relationships. This film is a lovely, meditative look into what it means to rebel against an unfair system, while also having love for those you hold close. It was just wonderful to see a film primarily starring women, about women, directed by a woman. And I'm very happy to see this film get the love and acclaim it deserves. Independent cinema is the only hope I have for the Indian film industry, and these filmmakers are the future. And then I ended the month with the much talked about Obsession. From the initial trailer, this was just a film that I was curious about. I'm someone who's personally really terrified of horror movies, so to get me to watch one, especially in theaters, means it should have gotten really good reviews. And over the last few weeks, there hasn't been a single day where I haven't heard about this movie and how great it apparently is. So my curiosity slowly turned into immense excitement as I walked into the movie theater nervous and ecstatic to see what all the buzz was about. And though it is unsurprising, I'm happy to say that I absolutely loved this movie. It is genuinely one of my favorite films of the year so far and is a true cinematic achievement. Yes, it's a simple, high-concept, low-budget horror film, but the film makes good use of its simple yet dark premise, using it to tackle themes of male entitlement, infatuation, and loss of bodily autonomy. It never beats you over the head with these themes. The film approaches them and its characters with a sense of restrained nuance. The filmmaking is staggeringly confident. Not only is it of high quality, given its low budget, but aided by the sharp sound design as well, it's extremely effective in creeping you out. It's been a while since I saw a film terrify an audience simply by how weirdly someone walks. The audience in my theater were not just scared but also found themselves laughing in several moments, which, by my guess, was a nervous response to just how bone-chilling many sequences were. Even though you would know a jump scare was coming, the film still finds a way to shock and horrify you when you least expect it. But ultimately, this is just a sinister and sad film. Despite having a wonderful time seeing this in a completely packed cinema hall, that final shot is something that is going to stay with me purely because of how gut-wrenching and contemplative it really is. And interestingly, it's not just the story of this movie that's great, but also the story behind it. The talk of the town has been about how this is just the second debut film of famous YouTuber Curry Barker, and how he managed to make such a great film with just $1 million. As of now, this film has made over 100 times its budget, and it's a very well-liked film amongst audiences as well. I mean, this film is performing better than the new Star Wars movie. News like this, and even the success of the Backrooms movie, gives me hope for the future of this medium. To see people of all ages step into cinemas to see the movies of young filmmakers is tremendously inspiring for someone like me as well, who's also a 20-year-old filmmaker slash YouTuber. I cannot wait to see what Curry makes next, and I'm incredibly happy to see this film be showered with the praise and recognition it so rightfully deserves. This is why I love the fucking movies, man. The perfect film to end this month with. And so yeah, these are all the 14 films that I watched in the month of May, and I have a bunch of lists to make because I just love doing that, and I have some new categories. Number 1, films I missed out on, what I was interested in and what I was not interested in. Number 2 are expected hits, films that I thought would be good and turned out to be good or even great. Then comes expected flops, a new category, which means a film that I did not expect much from and did not deliver as expected. Number 4 are pleasant surprises, films that I did not expect much from but turned out to really surprise me. Number 5, disappointments, pretty self-explanatory. And number 6, what I plan to see next month. And these are the movies ranked including the non-2026 releases. And these are the movies ranked with only 2026 releases. And these are the movies ranked with only the May releases. The films I missed out on that I was interested in. The films I missed out on that I was not really interested in. For expected hits, there is Dug Dug, Top Gun Maverick, Hokum, Shape of Momo, and Obsession. For expected flops, we have Ek Din and The Mandalorian Grogu. For pleasant surprises, we have The Devil Wears Prada 2 and The Sheep Detectives. For disappointments, we have Patriot and Drishyam 3. Funnily enough, 2 films with Mohanlal in them. And number 6, what I plan to see next month. And these are the films I plan to see next month ranked in the order of excitement. So yeah, that's what I watched this month. Thank you so much for watching. But until then, I will see you in the next video. Like, share, subscribe. You know the drill. Support the channel. It means the world to me. And until next time, I will see you later. Goodbye.